The U.S. ambassador to Canada was on the defensive in Halifax, accusing Canada of playing hardball when it comes to trade talks. Pete Hoekstra repeatedly told the Halifax Chamber of Commerce that Canada has it wrong, saying this isn't a trade war.
I would suggest that he gets a mirror and looks in it, because the issues that are between the U.S. and Canada are caused by the U.S.
Trade tensions between the United States and Canada have dragged on for months, fueled by President Trump's reciprocal tariffs. Into this already heated atmosphere came U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra speaking in Halifax. He tried to calm the waters, insisting this was not a trade war but only negotiations. He went further, saying Canadians lacked passion for the relationship with America. Instead of reducing tension, his words hit like a spark in dry grass. What was meant to soften the debate only hardened attitudes. For many Canadians, it sounded dismissive, even insulting.
Well, when you kick the dog, you can't blame it for snarling back. When you talk about annexation and you talk about a 51st state and you treat your partner like a second class.
All I know is I don't want to cross over right now to the U.S.
The reaction was immediate and emotional. Ordinary Canadians pushed back, accusing Washington of gaslighting. They pointed out that tariffs imposed by Trump were the true source of pain. People expressed their frustration in daily choices. More Canadians now choose to shop at home rather than cross the border. Statistics Canada reported that in August 2025, cross-border car trips returning from the United States fell by 34% compared to the previous year. U.S. alcohol sales inside Canada have declined, while Canadian book sales are up. Even trade flows show the impact. Canadian exports to the U.S. have dropped about 2% this year, equal to a $5 billion loss. These are not abstract numbers. They represent families in border towns, businesses losing revenue, and communities shifting their habits. Hoekstra's remarks only reinforce the sense that Canadians must close ranks and protect their own market.
We have the ambition, but a deal is a deal, and a deal has to go for both sides, and Canada will agree a deal that's in the best interest of Canadians. It should not surprise anyone, including the U.S. ambassador, who's doing a very good job, I would add. Thank you. For America.
Against this backdrop, Prime Minister Mark Carney responded. He did not shout or escalate. Instead, he drew a clear line. Carney said Canada would only pursue agreements that benefit Canadians, not deals designed in Washington. The so-called bigger deal suggested by the ambassador, covering steel, energy, and critical minerals, is not on the table unless it clearly serves Canada's interests. Carney reminded audiences that the USMCA already provides a functioning trade framework. While consultations with businesses are underway in all three countries, Ottawa is not desperate for a new bargain. Canada, he emphasized, has options. From deepening ties with Mexico to expanding trade with Europe and Asia, diversification is already shaping the future. The contrast could not be sharper. Hoekstra looked frustrated, searching for passion that is no longer there. Carney appeared as a steady statesman, reassuring Canadians that their sovereignty and industries will not be sacrificed. Carney's approach also resonated internationally. European and Asian partners have taken note of Canada's stance, interpreting it as a sign that Ottawa is serious about building a diversified trade network. By staying calm while Washington complained, Carney not only strengthened his hand at home, but also signaled abroad that Canada is a stable, reliable partner. This matters in a global economy where investors and governments alike are searching for certainty in the face of Trump's unpredictable swings. In the end, what was meant to downplay conflict has backfired. Hoekstra's remarks exposed Washington's frustration rather than Canada's weakness. Instead of dividing Canadians, they united public opinion and highlighted the real costs of Trump's tariffs. Canada now looks more confident, more willing to say no, and more determined to chart its own course. The optics are striking. The United States, once seen as the senior partner, now appears petty and defensive. Canada, once accused of being too reliant, now projects resilience and choice. Families who remember the sting of tariffs hear their leader promise not to repeat old mistakes. Workers see that their government is prepared to defend jobs and industries. This is the new reality of the relationship. Canada will negotiate only as an equal. Washington's pressure tactics no longer work. Instead of shaming Canadians into compliance, Hoekstra has shown how far America's leverage has slipped. Trump's tariff play, meant to force concessions, has left the United States isolated, while Canada grows stronger in conviction and strategy. Halifax will not be remembered for easing tensions, but for exposing U.S. frustration and Canada's resolve. What Trump called economic warfare has instead built resilience in Ottawa and unity among citizens. Canada's message is clear. It will work with the U.S. only as an equal, never on weaker terms.
I'm disappointed that I came to Canada, a Canada that it is very, very difficult to find Canadians who are passionate about the American-Canadian relationship. Elbows up, me too. It was an anti-American campaign.
At the start of 2025, President Trump launched his second term with an aggressive trade agenda. The White House imposed reciprocal tariffs ranging from 10 to 50% on key sectors, including steel, aluminum, copper, and even automobiles. Canada, America's closest trading partner, was hit immediately. Exports slowed, supply chains shifted, and the political climate turned tense. Yet when U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra arrived in Halifax, he told the Chamber of Commerce that this was not a trade war.
The cabinet's now saying that we're at war with America. That doesn't help, okay? Maybe in Canada saying we're at war, maybe that's something that Canadians stand up and say, yes, 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 okay? We have an enemy. I don't think so.
He accused Canada of exaggerating, of playing hardball, and of branding the United States as an enemy. The paradox is clear. Washington fired the first shot with tariffs, but now claims that Canada is overreacting. What the ambassador called negotiation, many Canadians experienced as direct economic pressure on jobs and communities.
We haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada. I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs.
Don't push a Canadian too far. I mean, push too far. Push too far.
Prime Minister Mark Carney framed the situation differently. For him, the phrase "elbows up" was not an anti-American slogan, but a way of telling Canadians to protect themselves when pushed around. That message resonated across the country. Families cut back on trips to the United States. According to Statistics Canada data for August, cross-border travel by car dropped 35%, while air travel to U.S. cities fell 25% year over year. Air Canada reduced flights south of the border and instead added 28 new international routes to Europe, the Caribbean, and South America. Consumers also adjusted their choices at home. Industry reports show American liquor sales in Canada plunged 62% in the latest quarter, forcing companies like Brown-Forman, the producer of Jack Daniels, to issue profit warnings. Loblaw, the country's largest grocery chain, removed dozens of U.S. items from shelves and replaced them with more than 100 Canadian suppliers. Even culture shifted. Indigo reported that sales of Canadian-authored books rose 25% year over year, while CBC Gem streaming surged 34%, lifting programs like Murdoch Mysteries and Heartland. These are not just slogans, they are real changes in daily life. The numbers tell an even bigger story. Canadian exports to the United States declined 2% this year, equal to roughly $5 billion Canadian dollars. That is a real loss. But exporters quickly looked elsewhere. Shipments to the United Kingdom jumped 63% in value, and sales to Europe rose 26%. In fact, the United Kingdom has now displaced China to become Canada's second largest trading partner. That shift demonstrates how pressure from tariffs has accelerated diversification. While Washington expected Ottawa to soften its position, Canadian companies found new buyers and new routes. The boomerang effect is hitting U.S. businesses hard. Alcohol producers have lost market share, and once Canadian shelves are restocked with local brands, that space is difficult to win back. What began as an attempt to squeeze Canada is instead eroding American commercial presence north of the border.
Ambassador Hoekstra urged Canadians to stop treating the United States as an adversary, but the direction is already changing. Prime Minister Carney traveled to Mexico this month to reinforce trade and energy cooperation. Ottawa is deepening links with Europe and the United Kingdom. Canadians are shifting how they travel, what they buy, and which markets they serve. The tariffs that were meant to reassert U.S. power have done the opposite. They have redefined the relationship, leaving Canada more self-reliant and less dependent on its neighbor. Trump wanted to prove that tariffs could force compliance. Instead, they are pushing Canada to stand taller, with Carney guiding a pivot that is reshaping trade, culture, and everyday choices. The backfire is no longer a prediction, it is the new reality of North American economics.
You say, and now he could suddenly, all of a sudden, open up the USMCA. What would the impact be for Canada and for the U.S. if President Trump pulled out of that agreement?
He wants to hurt the American people, and that's exactly what he's doing. That a tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people.
Since August 1st, Canada's trade with the United States has faced its toughest strain in decades, with Canada now among the hardest hit by Trump's latest global tariff measures.
Across the entire country of Canada, is probably closer to 20 million Americans rely on Canada for jobs, and vice versa. We rely on jobs with trade with the U.S., but it's just hurting both countries.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford didn't wait to sound the alarm. Speaking directly to American viewers on CNN, he warned that Trump could end or reopen USMCA with a single signature, years ahead of the scheduled 2026 review. Ford stressed that these tariffs are not just punishing Canadian exporters, they are effectively taxing American consumers. He pointed to recent job losses in the United States. More than 37,000 manufacturing jobs gone since April, the lowest employment level in that sector in 5 years, and $6.2 billion in new costs for the U.S. auto industry. Ford's choice to take this message to U.S. media wasn't just about defending Ontario. It was aimed at building political pressure inside the United States, where the economic fallout is already visible. While Ford has chosen to confront Trump's tariff agenda head-on in the public arena, Prime Minister Mark Carney is taking a different path, one defined by strategic patience and careful calculation.
Of course, the Prime Minister has to weigh all industries, not just the specific industries that are immediately impacted, but has to weigh industries against industries, has to weigh region against region and the unity of the country. Well, I think it's been a very wise and strategic, a cohesive approach on behalf of all Canadians.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's response has been deliberate. After the August 1st increase, Ottawa did not announce a fresh round of retaliatory tariffs. Instead, Carney emphasized keeping channels to Washington open and weighing the national interest across all sectors before acting. Carney's calculation rests on the fact that USMCA still shields most of Canada's trade. In June, Royal Bank of Canada data showed that 92% of Canadian exports to the US entered duty-free. The remaining 8%, largely steel, aluminum, and other sensitive products, faced an average tariff of about 30%. Rather than rush into concessions, Carney's team is pursuing market diversification. Trade with the European Union has grown by double digits, exports to the United Kingdom are up, and high-level ministers have been in Mexico to coordinate strategy and avoid the divide-and-conquer approach many in Ottawa expect from Trump in any USMCA renegotiation.
Yes, we're having discussions with the Americans.
Prime Minister Carney wouldn't say when he'll next speak to U.S. President Donald Trump, but Ontario's premier didn't mince words.
What's the general impression of Trump in Canada?
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada.
Ford and Carney are working toward the same end, protecting Canada's economic position, but their methods could not be more different. Ford speaks in blunt terms, calling Trump the most disliked political figure in Canada and focusing on the American costs of tariffs. Carney stays measured, avoids personal attacks, and times his interventions to maximize leverage at the negotiating table. This dual track, public pressure and quiet diplomacy, has so far kept Canada's response cohesive while signaling to Washington that Ottawa will not fold quickly. The threat of an early USMCA rupture is real. Trump has shown he's willing to move outside established timelines if it strengthens his bargaining position. Yet Canada retains leverage. Strategic minerals critical to U.S. manufacturing, energy exports, and a strong agricultural trade. Trump also faces rising consumer prices and job losses at home, which could narrow his room to escalate. The challenge for Canada will be to maintain its stance without closing the door on solutions that serve both sides. The period since August 1st has revealed a high-stakes test of endurance between Washington and Ottawa. Trump is pressing hard with tariffs to force movement. Carney is meeting that pressure with strategic patience, while Ford raises the volume in the U.S. media. How long each side can hold their position, and what political cost Trump is willing to bear, will determine whether this standoff ends in a balanced agreement or in a rupture that reshapes North American trade far sooner than planned.